Hindi is overwhelming. There are just so many things that you don't know where to start, what to learn, and how to learn. In this video, I will break down what I have found as the best structure to learn Hindi, and we will go over that. But before that, my name is Hitendra. I'm a Hindi teacher and I make Hindi related content to help you learn Hindi. So let's get to the guide to learn what would be the best way to learn Hindi. First, let's establish the goal. The goal is to reach a conversation level in order to speak Hindi fluently, because conversation level will open up your knowledge about the language and will give you enough skills to include comprehension in your language learning. So there are three things you need to learn a language, or Hindi in this case, because my experience is in Hindi. So the first one is structure. The second one is comprehension. And the third one is immersion. First, structure. When it comes to structure, this is what I follow to help all my students to learn Hindi or reach their Hindi learning goals. The structure includes starting from vocabulary, but not just any vocabulary, especially the one that you will need to make three tenses in Hindi. I tend to more focus on past tense, present continuous, and future tense. I tend to not include present tense in the beginning because first of all, it's very simple, and second of all, you don't really need it because you tend to use more I'm coming, I'm going when you are conversing for your daily routine rather than using I come, I go. And that's why I tend to include present continuous more than present tense in the start. Next thing is to include time, sentence structure, preposition, question forms, and pronouns. You actually want to sprint toward the question forms because once you have the question forms, then you can ask questions, you can reply to the question, and you can understand them, which is the first step towards reaching a conversation level, is to be able to answer a question and to be able to ask a question. Now, once the structure is in order, the next thing you need to work on is the comprehension. Now, when it comes to comprehension, this is the most important part to learn a language. In this case, of course, we are talking about Hindi. So, comprehension is very important. Now, when it comes to comprehension, there is a good news and a bad news. The bad news is when it comes to material in Hindi, there is not a lot of material that you can use for Hindi comprehension. Because for comprehension, what you actually want is to look at the videos, movies, songs, or podcasts. Now I understand movies and songs, they would not really help you that much. Movies would, but they are very complex and long. Podcasts. Now when it comes to podcasts, either they speak it too fast or they are using way too many slangs to be able to learn a language through them. Hindi in this case. Because eventually in the comprehension, you need at least 10 minutes a day of daily exposure towards the language to get better at that language. And 10 minutes will get you very far, like very, very far. The good news is I do have some podcast episodes and I will release some more. So if you want, I try to talk slowly in them and explain some things in Hindi. So you can check them out. They're not very long. So 10 or 15 minutes of dedicated time in a day would get you very, very far. And I try to speak as a native speaker, but slowly and in a simpler Hindi, so that you can improve your Hindi with the podcast rather than getting overwhelmed by I don't know what the hell he is saying. And even if you feel that you don't understand what I'm saying, the whole point of this is to get exposure towards that language. So even if you don't understand, just stick with it, listen to it. Eventually you will get better. Write down the vocabulary words that you don't understand from that podcast so you can search for them in future. But again, what you're aiming for is the constant exposure towards that language. Especially if people around you don't speak Hindi, then you do want some sort of exposure in Hindi to get better at it. Regular exposure, I must say. Okay, once we are done with that, the next thing that you need to improve your Hindi is immersion. Immersion. Now that you have become part of the language and understand basic Hindi, the next thing you want to do is immerse yourself in that language. And that is by, again, consuming Hindi content. But now you don't need to consume these slow podcasts. Now you can go towards movies, try to understand slang, culture. How does a Hindi native speaker would say a certain thing, or why people say things differently, or why there is no sentence structure when it comes to some dialogues or some slangs in a comedy video or a movie. The whole point of this is not just to get the idea of Hindi, but to get the culture of Hindi. What are some of the slangs that people use? How people use Hindi differently depending on the regions? What are some other ways of saying the same word? And even the filler words in Hindi. Filler words in any language is probably the most underrated topic of all, I think. When someone is asking you a sentence and you are formulating the sentence in your mind, you will need filler words. Believe me, when I started speaking English, when I came to Bali, I could not speak 10 seconds without using the word like. And even now, like is probably the most used word in my vocabulary. But it helps me a lot to connect sentences and to fill the awkward gap which I have when I'm formulating a sentence. And that is it. These are the 3 things you need in order to achieve your Hindi learning goals: structure, comprehension, and immersion. If you follow these steps and remember the most important thing, then you will go very far in Hindi. And the most important thing is, a language learning is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Alvida, फिर मिलेंगे.